Two of the people who performed the hijrah, Habiba, and this is what she is famous by. If you look in books of hadith or tariq, you will find Habiba. But her actual name is Ramla bint Abi Sufyan. We know about Abu Sufyan, the famous earlier, who was a staunch enemy of Islam and later a great Sahabi. Especially if you look at a lot of the service he did for the Ummah in the battles in the later time, you see him to be a very famous figure in Islamic history. She is his daughter. And many people don't realize that Abu Sufyan's daughter was married to the Prophet ﷺ. So Habiba ends up being one of the wives of Rasulullah ﷺ, and there is Salama. Both of them are in that first hijrah to Habasha, and both of them end up being from the mother of the believers, from the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen. And both of them, you will see the reason, and this is very important in the Seerah Durus. What we try to do is every time we come to a marriage of the Prophet ﷺ, we talk about what was the reason for it. And you will find that none of them were for worldly pleasure. Other than the marriage maybe Khadija radiallahu anha before prophethood, none of them were by the will of the Prophet ﷺ himself. There was always an Islamic reasoning for it, and we'll talk about that inshallah. Habiba, she had performed the hijrah with the Muslims to Habasha from Mecca with her husband of the time, whose name was Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. We know the famous Zainab bint Jahsh. This is her brother, Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh was the husband of Habiba, and they both performed the hijrah together. Now, in the Kutub of Seerah, like Ibn Ishaq and the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd, it is reported that Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh became a murtad. He became Christian. And this is well known. Like if you look at almost every well-known comprehensive book that's written on the Seerah, they will mention this. If it's a comprehensive book. Some books are very small, they don't really even cover this. But the essence of it always goes back to two sources. One of them being Ibn Ishaq, one of the earlier kutub of Seerah. But Ibn Ishaq mentioned this without a sanad. The other being Ibn Sa'd in his Tabaqat, who mentions it from Al-Waqidi. Al-Waqidi is a matruk narrator. Due to it being well known, many of the ulama of Tariq have relied upon this. But I'm going to reject this narration today, inshallah. It took a long time to research, but I'm going to mention why. First off, the Waqidi is a narrator that is matruk, or mawdu', depending on the grading, but he's extremely weak. The best of the other narrations that I could find were mursal. They were weak in and of themselves, but not just that. In it, we could have accepted, looking at supporting and the wide-known news and so on, but it is contradicted by that which is stronger. In the Sunan of Abu Dawud, the famous hadith collection, with the Sahih, the authentic chain, it mentions about Habiba kana tahta Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. She was with or under, meaning married to Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. فَمَاتَ بِأَرْضِ حَبَشَةٍ, and he died in the land of Habasha. It does not mention anything about his irtad or leaving and so on. And then she is married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after that, while Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in Medina. So if this incident had happened that he had become murtad, then that marriage would have taken before his death. And he was already murtad, then their nikah would have been broken. So this is the first issue, that it contradicts that which is authentic there. Secondly, Heraclius or Hirqal, the king of the Romans, in later in the Seerah, around Hudaybiyah, when he meets Abu Sufyan. Who's Abu Sufyan? Her father. Right? He asks him about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a very beautiful hadith. We'll get to it in the Seerah when we get to it. But one of the things he asks Abu Sufyan is the followers who become Muslim, the followers of the Prophet ﷺ, do they make irtad? Do they leave the religion? Do they go back from the religion? And Abu Sufyan says no. And that's a general rule we see the Sahaba, that they didn't leave. And we talk about later on in the wars of the irtad and stuff, most of those were not Sahaba anyway, and so on. But at this time in Hudaybiyah, Abu Sufyan clearly says no. If his own son-in-law had become murtad, then he would have definitely pointed that out. So it shows that what we find Sahih in the Sunan of Abi Dawud and what we find Sahih later in the Tarikh, it shows that this weak narration cannot be relied upon even as a Hasan li ghayrihi or acceptable. So what we say is that even though, and again, in researching for this dars, I listened to a lot of the well-known seerah durus, and I looked up tons of books, and it's spread all over, like on the internet, all those durus have it, but we have to rely upon that which is authentic, which means that what is authentically known is Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh died a Muslim, radiyallahu anhu. That this narration of him leaving Islam, becoming Christian in Habasha is not proven. It is contradictory, it's munkar to that which is stronger. So what do we say? Habiba, she made hijrah with her husband Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. Knowing what is authentically reported in the Sunan Abi Dawud, we do know that he died in Habasha. Now, one thing is to make hijrah for a woman is difficult. Even today it's difficult. But at that time it was very difficult for a woman to leave her family and leave her environment and leave where she was at, go to a foreign land. But when you're with your husband or you're with a mihram like a father or brother, you have that support, you have that confidence to somebody you can rely upon. When you're on your own land, like you're in your own country where you have your own house and your own family and your own gathering, yes, she can live by herself. But to live in a foreign land, a land that is at that time majority kuffar. Habasha was not like Medina. And even Medina, when they first made hijrah, was not majority Muslim. So in a land that is mostly Christians there. And it's a foreign land. The language is different. The people are different. For her, by herself being there, was very difficult. And this is where the iman of the people gets tested. If somebody is weak in iman, then obviously for the people of Habasha, the people there who were Christians, would have loved for her to have left Islam and become Christian. And they would have supported her, and they would have got her married, and they would have given her wealth, and they would have taunted the Muslims, because even though Najashi, he was very fair and just, but as we mentioned, Alhamdulillah. So as we mentioned, the priests and the other people there, they were not happy about the Sahaba being there. And in some of the books of Sirah that don't go into depth, and especially what we see online, like the videos and little cartoons, they make it seem like Habasha was like just totally welcoming. No, many of the people there, the priests, and especially who had made their living of calling people towards worshiping Isa ibn Maryam, they were not happy about Najashi accepting the Muslims and being lenient, and we talked about in the last dars. But this is a woman who brought iman upon tahqiq, upon research. She had known her own father was a staunch enemy at that time of Islam, and she had brought iman. Imagine if Abu Sufyan and these people, the leaders of Quraysh, what they were doing to the Sahaba. Imagine when his own daughter became Muslim, how angry he must have been. And for her to then have left, being from the household of one of the leaders of Quraysh, and then living in the hardships of being in Habasha, and then without a husband, without that support, without a brother, without a father there, it must have been very difficult. But she was strong in her iman, and she kept to her faith.